We'll tear your soul apart. Be my victim. But the prime time, bitch!
The Hellraiser franchise is a very bizarre and often uneven collection of films that span decades, offering everything from twisted psychological horror to gory slasher flicks. While there have certainly been some highs in the franchise, there have also been quite a bit of major lows. Today, we'll rank the Hellraiser films based on various aspects such as storytelling, character development, the use of Pinhead and the other Cenobites, and overall contribution to the series' mythology. Let's dive in. Starting at the very bottom is Hellraiser Revelations, a film that feels more like a fan-made project rather than an actual installment in the Hellraiser's franchise. The story is very forgettable, the acting is subpar at best, and the film offers very little in terms of the horror and thematic depth that made the series iconic. Pinhead is barely in the film, and when he does show up, it feels like a cheap imitation. This entry is arguably the least enjoyable and most forgettable in the entire franchise. It's a disappointing, very rushed mess. Next up is Hellraiser Hellseeker, which is arguably the worst film in the franchise thematically. The story is predictable, the pacing is slow, and the characters are so flat. The mystery, which centers around a car crash survivor, falls flat due to its obvious twists. And the film ultimately lacks the psychological and body horror elements that made the original film so compelling. Probably the worst in the franchise, but I guess from enjoyment level, I could say I enjoyed it a bit more than the previous film. Just a bit. Hellraiser Deader is another film that feels very disconnected from the essence of the franchise. While the film introduces a cult that interacts with the lament configuration, the story itself is dull and lacks the atmosphere or creativity that fans expect. The characters are very underdeveloped, and the film's slow pacing makes it feel more like a generic horror film than an actual Hellraiser film. Though there are some attempts to tap into the series' themes, they're drowned out by the weak plot and just the lack of depth overall. Pointless and forgettable. Moving up a bit, Hellraiser Inferno offers some cool dreamlike visuals, but unfortunately it doesn't make up for its lack of excitement or substance. The detective-focused story, which this franchise does a lot by the way, is just dull, and the Cenobites are barely involved. While it's visually interesting at times, the film struggles to hold the viewer's attention and feels more like a half-assed psychological thriller than a Hellraiser entry. The minimal Pinhead involvement is very disappointing, and the film just doesn't make much of an impact. Cool visuals, but ultimately boring and lacking purpose. Hellraiser Judgment is an attempt to bring the franchise back to its roots, but it falls short living up to the legacy of the original films. The film brings in some grotesque visuals, and has a decent performance from its Pinhead, although it's not Doug Bradley, who has become iconic in the role. The film's body horror elements are gross, and they get very gross at times when it doesn't come to the body horror as well. But they never managed to create the same sense of terror as those earlier films. Maybe it's the time, or maybe it's just they didn't know what to do with the character or this franchise. It's a missed opportunity and is ultimately forgettable like a lot of these films in this franchise are, even though it had a good chance to revitalize the series. Gross and occasionally intriguing, but ultimately forgettable. A lot of people don't like this movie, and I understand why, but for me, while Hellraiser Hellworld is flawed, it's undeniably a lot more fun than a lot of films ranked lower. The early 2000s horror vibe and slasher elements add an interesting twist for me personally, though it doesn't truly feel like a Hellraiser film, and Pinhead's role is very minimal. However, the chaotic energy and unique atmosphere make it a guilty pleasure for some fans, me included, who appreciate cheesy over-the-top horror. Fun, but doesn't really feel like a Hellraiser film. Hellbound Hellraiser 2 is more of an ambitious sequel that expands on the Hellraiser universe. It explores the labyrinthian hellscape introduced in the first film and takes the series into a more surreal, nightmarish realm. While it offers some great visuals and deepens the lore, it sometimes feels overstuffed with ideas. The film's pacing is uneven, and while it's a worthy follow-up, it doesn't capture the same eerie simplicity as the original film. Still, it's an essential part of the Hellraiser mythos and solid horror film. Expands on the lore, but sometimes feels a bit too much. Hellraiser Hell on Earth is a fun, over-the-top entry that leans into slasher roots and gives us some of the more memorable and ridiculous Cenobite design, like the CD or camera head Cenobites. It's just so dumb but so much fun. The heavy metal vibe and chaotic energy make it a blast, and while it lacks deeper existential themes of the original films, it's a great watch for anything looking for a gory, high-energy horror ride. It's not deep, it's just entertaining. Hellraiser Bloodline is a unique and ambitious entry that spans multiple time periods. It's basically the very first Hellraiser film and the very last Hellraiser film all in once, expanding from 18th century France to futuristic space setting. The attempt to explore the origins of the Lament configuration is intriguing, and while the film's space finale doesn't quite hit the way I wanted it to, the historical and present day segments are very strong. The ambition is clear, and while the execution falters at times, it's still a fun, visually engaging film that adds layers to the Hellraiser lore. This may make a lot of people angry, but I do enjoy this movie. I just don't think it's the best in the franchise anymore. The original film is a masterclass in horror, combining deep psychological terror with visceral body-shredding horror. Clive Barker's vision is realized in every frame, with Pinhead becoming an iconic figure and the Cenobites being a perfect representation of a twisted balance between pain and pleasure. Even today, there is nothing quite like it, and it remains a genre-defining classic. But for me personally, I enjoyed this movie a little bit more. The 2022 reboot of Hellraiser was a big surprise. It's a visually stunning, atmospheric horror film that stays true to the series' roots while introducing a fresh take. Jamie Clayton's portrayal of Pinhead is fantastic, and the film's body horror and existential themes are brought to the forefront in a way that feels more modern yet respectful to the franchise's origins. I didn't think they could do it, but it is definitely a worthy entry that proves there's still life in the Hellraiser franchise, and I really hope it gets a sequel. Atmospheric, unsettling, and a worthy return to the Hellraiser world. Overall, the Hellraiser franchise is full of ups and downs, but even the worst entries can have moments of intrigue or fun. But let me know what you guys think of this franchise. What is your ranking? If you haven't seen all the films, let me know what your favorites are. And if you liked this video, or if you didn't like this video, hit that thumbs up button, that subscribe button, and that notification bell to stay up to date with all the horror content I have coming your way. Stay scared, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.